Ciao. Hi, Tibor.
Ciao. Hi, Luca.
How are you?
Good, good. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I'm in a park right now, so not that bad.
You're what? You're in a park?
Yeah, in a park. So
that's not a virtual background. That's the real background.
No, it's an authentic one. So.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
Ciao, Christian. Ciao, Maxime.
Hi.
Ciao. Hi. Hi, everyone. Okay, Maxime is also there. Ciao, Maxime.
Hey.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Good to see you. Finally.
Likewise. Likewise. Ciao, Elena. Okay. Okay. We go, I guess. And yeah, so no, very welcome. This ninth appointment of this series of talks. We are very happy today to have Maxime Prananto and then Superposition magazine. I guess Tibor, you will talk, and Christian SUMI from Burkhalter SUMI office. So thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And we, as usual, we will briefly introduce you to the public. Today, Maxime will talk first, and then Christian as a second, and Tibor as last speaker. So starting from Maxime. Maxime Prananto, he's an architect living and working in between Ghent and Brussels, and he will be one of our participants for the next FakeAuthentic exhibition. When we think about him, in our mind, he's that guy extremely focused on the minimum frictions of details and materials, and that's why, from our understanding, he seems to be the best friend of a blacksmith, I would say. His design practice produces interventions, furnitures, objects, and exhibitions, and photography as well. He has been involved already several times, surrounded by very interesting names like Maniera Brussels, Barbier Bouvet Studio, and Richard Vellet. A strange column that measures space taking position itself in an unconventional, unexpected way will be his contribution to our physical events that will happen in September at the gallery of Antonia Iannone here in Milano. So that's briefly all. Thanks a million, Maxime, again for taking part to this, and I leave you the word. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I just share
please.
Screen, I guess. Yep. Okay, is that working?
Yeah, now we see.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, it's very strange, I would say, to for once think about a few words. You know, in that we, I think every kind of artistic or design practice, they deal with language in many ways. But I find myself being very maybe too focused on developing one language and really having to put some effort into also interpreting many other languages. So in this case, I picked a few images that they're images that I made very randomly, I would say, a bit by chance. And they're sort of, I use them as kind of reminders to interpret different kinds of languages, to approach seeing things, to approach doing things as well. They work in a sort of maybe not unlike Memento Mori, that it's supposed to really remind you of a way in which to do or a way in which to see. So first up is this, it's kind of a small facade that mainly covers a doorway, which I like to look back at, in that it reminds me that there can be a very genuine, and I think a very generous way to deal with fakeness. In that, you know, when you look at this in a purely sort of functional or sort of solutionist way, there's nothing more than to sort of hide a few different functions. In that, there's this, you know, this left doorway that goes out, the right doorway that's actually this this width that goes in to the building, and then there's a kind of a smaller access which pivots out as well, which maybe a kind of a technical access. I think what you see here, or what I see at least, is more than just the hiding of a few functions that may be, or left alone, could be somewhat harsh, could be a bit maybe unflattering to perceive. I think there's more going on, in that it's trying to become an image. It's trying to become a thing that will be remembered as an image, a facade that will be remembered as a facade. I think it does not. I think it's beautiful in the way that it doesn't make sense. The construction in front, you know, it's split up into different parts. Where here, you know, this is a cut because the door has to go out. This part also moves freely from this part. Yeah, so I think in general, I think there's something very nice, there's something very wholesome about this approach of, okay, it's admitting that there's some conceit going on, there's some deceiving going on, but it's trying to do more than that. I think in a very likable way, to me at least. Yeah. So secondly, I have an object. In this case, it's more of a found object. I spotted it in a local steel yard. It's made by one of the employees at the steel yard. So basically, it's just meant as a dispenser for the steel straps that are used in logistics, you know, to wrap the final orders or the pieces for transport. I think what I really love about this this object is, in terms of authenticity, if we bring it back to that term, is maybe the lack of self-awareness in the object, or that it's an object which cannot really be designed. And I like to use it in that way, to remind myself that some things truly are very meaningful as a design, when they're just a series of decisions that are consecutive, that are that have a certain order to them. In this case, you know, the basic idea of it should be that it's a very narrow box in which to hold the different sizes of spools, then to access them, to see them also. You have this little cut, you know, can be quite heavy. You want to move it. You have the addition of this little leg and the wheel to hold it level. There's this little T section, and then to truly dispense it, you have this U channel and the little tie wraps to keep the strap in place. So you see all these different decisions also in a certain order, and they can be very much separated. And then when you look at the object itself, you
To speak out first.
you can I can still really see every element and see that it's that it's also formed in a very evident way from its surrounding. You just see the leftovers being used. Yeah, so I like to use it as a reminder not to design in some cases, to let things be a solution, and not to impose always this sort of bird's eye view of a designer. Okay, thirdly, I have this I think a very, very beautiful image that to me is truly iconic. It really stays in my mind all the time. So we have the demarcation of two pieces of acre, two pieces of land, and we have a hiking path or an access path, which is used by the farmers that's going across it. And so we really have nothing more, I would say, than the low voltage wire, which runs here, that just needs an interruption. And that pretty much is the end of it in terms of functionality. I think the posts do nothing more than to hold the wire up, and then we have the little spinning filter to keep people moving, to keep the kettle out, or keep it on either side. I think in this sense, it's a very again, a solutionist way to go about things with minimal effort. But what makes it iconic is that it also becomes an easily recognizable image. It becomes a typology of its own that can be remembered really without seeing the example. It can be applied again and again in this kind of situation without having the example ready. And again, just like in the previous image, it really talks about the order of things, the way in which the land is first separated, and then the pathway is secondary and it intrudes, which is something I find very useful. Opposed to that, in the ironic category, I think when thinking of the word ironic, to me it's very close to authentic, in that there's also this, it's also about the lack of self-awareness, but in this case it's a lack of or it's an unawareness of a contradiction. You know, in this case, it's the entry to a private stairway in the street, where the entrance of the house is really at the back because of a large height difference between street and entry. And we have this, the hand railing, which continues all the way up. But then on the street side, it becomes this very, very short piece of hand railing. So in this case, I think the contradiction is that it's really truly much like in the case of the facade. It's trying to fulfill an image. It's trying to fulfill also an idea or a logic of always having something to hold on to in a very functional way. without really making much sense at all, which I find also very, very beautiful. In the functional sense, it doesn't work because it's kind of hard to see in this image, but this is the hinge side of the gate. So in any case, when you open the gate, it just covers the piece of hand railing. But then secondly, I love that it also, the fact that it's cut here, that the railing is cut, changes this typology on the street side, because we think of the hand railing as this long element that's being held every so often by an anchor. But then on the street side, we have a very short element that's held by only one anchor. And I truly love that kind of coincidence. I love that kind of effect of trying to fulfill that idea, trying to fulfill that image, and then ending up with a more sort of randomized result, and quite a contradiction as well. And then lastly, I think this is something that sort of everyone knows. This, to me, I took this image just also sort of randomly, without really approaching what you see here, which I would say it's kind of a plastic garden set. What I truly love about this, and why I put it into the fake iconic category, is that to me this is a series of objects. At the same time, it's a product which really supersedes any particularities. It supersedes any specifics, because it's just so omnipresent. It's been mass produced. It's been around for so long. Hasn't changed much. I know what the table feels like before I reach it. I know what it's like to sit in that plastic chair before I sit in it. And it fulfills an image. It's one that you don't need to see this image to know what this is like. That's why it's become iconic in my mind, and it's become iconic beyond return, I think, because it's made that transition from a few objects into a product, which has become very nameless, very faceless. And that's where the contradiction lies, because we think of a chair, we think of a table separately, as still very much particular objects that we deal with day in and day out, that we try to design and try to redesign and reiterate. But then again, you put them together in this particular material, in this particular image, and it really becomes its own typology. And I don't see any way to reverse that anymore, which is okay, which I quite like as well. So it becomes a kind of symbol of its own. Yeah, and then lastly, this is the kind of sample piece of the piece I'm making, of the column. Yeah, I think Luca explained it quite well, maybe better than I could. In that it's truly about a piece about contradiction. It's truly about the very iconic shape of the I-beam, which is I mean such an old typology in the history of construction. And then it's sort of inverse shape with the double T section. But yeah, obviously in a functional way, it's also looking for that contradiction to see if there's anything interesting there. It will just be a column. It will just be a sculpture with no further functionality, other than to indicate the height of the room, to really subject itself fully to the room. And yeah, I don't quite know what to expect in terms of how it works, or maybe doesn't work. But I'm quite interested to see, yeah, to see if the contradiction survives or if it just sort of falls apart. I don't know.
We are curious. I mean, we are very much looking forward to see that and to understand exactly what it is. I mean, we have a perception, we still don't know what it is and if we are correct or no, but yeah, really curious. And Maxime, thank you very much for the presentation. I think if you go back to that image, the previous one, to me it was very strange because of the fake plastic chairs. All of a sudden, even the trees and the stones started to get a kind of fake. So I thought it was a sort of polystyrene choreography. But no, I like very much your sensitivity, and thanks a million for bringing these on the table, because there's a certain humbleness and beauty of things in your eyes, I guess, and also the how do you bring this knowledge in making of things together with your imagination. I think it's also one beautiful aspect from to be underlined from your work. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you very much
for the contribution. Yeah. Okay, and now we go to Christian SUMI from the office of Marianne Burkhalter and Christian SUMI. They are a practicing architect, and since 2020 they are back from to a smaller atelier after a wider period as one of the most affirmed Swiss practice, I would say. Have been lucky enough to meet them as a MAXIME professor in the Academia of Mendrisio, and what I love about them is the sense of curiosity on almost every range of what the world offers to us. So from timber construction and timber experimentation to color eye-catching languages, pure passion for Le Corbusier, an unbelievable Minoletti's knowledge, Gottfried Semper, always in their backpack, and such and such and such. And I think they are an example as architects and as well as human beings, I would say. And it's always so good to think back to them when you need energy. And as well, I often think to you and to Marianne and Christian all the time. I see, of course, an old Citroën. So thank you very much for coming, and I leave you the word. Thanks a million.
Okay, Luca, thank you very much with these kind words. We had the chance to follow some of the talks, and we are very, how to say, we have a lot of respect of your new generation. There's a lot of curiosity, very precise reading of issues. On the other hand, poetic, always with a certain respect to the profession. So we are looking forward about your generation. Where would it go? Will there be a turning point? Or where do you think to go in between reverential and non-reverential, and so. Anyway, an amazing field of ideas, and we were very impressed. Now, I try to, I'm not very, I hope this works. Okay, here we go. So, as you said before, Maren and me, we are in a different situation, probably like you, because we, these days, part of our archive will go to ETH. So there's a moment of looking back, we did, and but there's no nostalgia. I think it's a liberation. You know, we are quite happy that all this, I think there are about 50 models will leave us, and we have more space in our head to think about new things. And so one thing is, because Italy was for all the work, for our work, very, very important, you know, as you know. And maybe not so much of the stylistic issue of all these great architects, but we were always interested about the thinking behind, you know, what is the machine? How do they develop projects? So this is what we're gonna show you. Is some is a kind of homage to this great Italian architect. And these are the figures you all know. It's about Caccia Dominioni, Marco Zanuso, Minoletti, Joe Ponti, and then a pretty crazy project from Rome, the Casa Sperimentale. And so we tried to put these architects in these different categories, but there is always a question, you know, we are not sure at all. But so it's a speculation about certain issues. Caccia Dominioni, a very, very important figure for the younger generation Zurich. And it's very funny that sometimes we think that there are more Caccia Dominionis in Zurich as in Milano. So a big, big figure. For this issue, Maren, we were asked to say something about this building, this housing building in Via Nievo, I think it's, from late 50s. And so we tried to understand the typology and the structure. And there was one thing we were interested about the facade, you know, what the hell is this facade? You know, where is the construction and what's exactly going on? So here Caccia Dominioni gives us an idea about the structure of the facade. You know, in these big windows, you see the two columns. And it's funny, so the columns are behind this line here. And the other line is here. So Caccia Dominioni does not show on actually the reality of the thing. It's a kind of a blur, you know, which is actually the quality. So the two columns you see here and here are the two. So we could say it's a kind of contamination. You know, this is not a pure architecture, but contamination is the best sense of the word, you know. So here is the structure of these black elements you find here. This is for the shading elements, the sliding shading elements we are behind, but at the same time, they cover the structure of the building, you know. Here's another one. So we call it fake in a very positive way, you know, and we have to be clear, the step from construction to tectonic has this aspect of fake, you know. Palladio Villa, the whole architecture plays within 10 centimeters. So that's what I mean. Okay, the keyword would be contamination. Now the opposite, a great architect we are working on now, because the archives are in Mendrisio, Marco Zanuso, and we work on his less known industrial building for Olivetti, Brion Vega. And I want to show you, these are about 7 columns. We made a superposition of the joint, actually with the students in Mendrisio. So my point would be that these constructions somehow are authentic. We could discuss about, but there's a certain reality in the construction side which we always love. You know, we actually the research we are making on Marco Zanusa, we will make it with a view to his construction site to understand him. And it has a huge power, you know, this is the real thing, you know, there's power, there's aggression, you see the beams and all these things. So my point would be that construction site and ruins are authentic. I'm not sure, but it's interesting that the first step of a building and maybe the last step could be, we might call them identical. These are these very beautiful construction drawings we find of the construction of the pillars and the beam, this relation here. The other one is Giuliano Minoletti, which you spoke about when we make with the archives in Mendrisio the monography. And this is an important building in Milano, Palazzo di Fuoco. And I think it's iconic in the sense of this kind of rainbow facade, which changed the color in relation to time and weather. You see on top, there's a watch here. So this is a situation at 20 minutes after 10, and this is 3 minutes later. So it's a huge machine which constantly change the facade. The interesting point on my proposition is the following one. This was an article in '62 in Time magazine, and it's called Europe After the Dark. And this means Europe after the war. And here the credit is quite interesting what they say, you know, with this house. Rainbow hues in Milan distinguish office building to open this fall on square where Mussolini body was exhibited. It's interesting. I think maybe this is how I can be produced, you know, that you have these amazing two events, you know, the figure in relation to the war of Mussolini, and then you have this light machine, you know, so the facade should bring light into the darkness of Europe. So my thing would be iconic needs context, or context creates iconic. You know, to decide that somebody would say, well, we're going to make iconic building. This is deep postmodernism. I think it has no power. So the question of iconic is very often related to another story. So that's what I'm trying to say here. The fourth one, quite an interesting book by Joe Ponti, Amate l'architettura, and the subtitle is L'architettura è un cristallo. A book, I think, published in 1957, and some people will translate it in German, and we were invited to write something. It's quite difficult to, you know, because Joe Ponti, this is a kind of, it's a firework when he writes, you know, and it's redundant and so on, but in the best way of the word. So to translate it from this kind of power Italian into strong German is not so easy. So we made some tests, and I think we are right. Just two images I would like to show. You know, ironic is, or let's say the other way around. The other way, the reason why Joe Ponti was also criticized is that the people said, well, he's a formalist, you know, it's just about beauty and so on. And I think this is really too short, you know. He's a very complex figure. And there's a saying by Max Bill, maybe, which help us a little bit to make a step. He said beauty from function and beauty as function. It's a very important distinction, and I think this works with of course, with Joe Ponti. This drawing is very funny. You know, we have you have an obelisk, different variation of an obelisk he makes here, starting from this. And then he makes this drawing, a house, where he takes this obelisk and you have the articulation of the edges. And then he writes the following thing. Disegnavo un tempo le mie facciate, era un visio con l'accento di due binacoli. Era come l'espostazione di un tono, di un ritmo, di una decisione. Era come una prova, poi li toglievo qualche volta, procede ancora così. So this is this amazing artistic mobility of Chopin. He takes a lot of risk, you know, but then he breaks it again. So, and the other one is wonderful. He said the difference between the Northern House and the Mediterranean House. And he said, the Northern House, the architecture goes from here to on the top. And the Mediterranean house has no roof. I mean, it's a playful thing, you know. So the Mediterranean, I don't know whether you see it, ends here, and so it's the roof as the icon north, you know. It's a cliche about like we in the north, we live still in some tents in the woods and so on, while the Mediterranean world is completely different, you know. So, and it's a very precise drawing, you know, with the structure and so on. So it's a very clever, playful, but probably true or interesting remark he makes between the notion of the roof in the north and in the south, which of course then in the modern things change completely. And the last thing is this crazy house in Rome, Casa Sperimentale, and I think this is everything. It's just too much, you know. So it's let's say it's iconic, for instance, because a famous hip hop band from your country, I think it's called 777. They made a video there without permission, and this just went viral. That's why it's iconic. It's ironic in the sense it's probably also a comment of modernism. You know, modernism is it's an endless machine. So this villa is a little bit on the end of something. It's fake. The way I will show you, because I hope it works. It's a point cloud celebration, but it's authentic. It's still there. You know, it's a ruin now. So I tried to show it on another way. Let me see if I'm not sure whether it works. I have to check here. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, have a look to the link. It's really, it's amazing. It's great.
Okay, no, we will. Thank you, Christian. Thank you very much for your participation and to your ode to Italian architecture that we are missing very much in this period in Italy. So it's always good to refer back to the beauty of Caccia Dominioni and all the others. Thanks a million. And all the best to Marianne also.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And now, last but not least, we have superposition. So I was wrong before. I apologize for that. Today, it's not only Tibor that will talk. We will have the pleasure to have also Elena and Dominic, who was with us also the last week. So it's nice to see you back, Dominic. I briefly introduce you guys, and I thank you for joining us. And the reason why we call you, it's at least because we want to underline your work, since we do believe and we want to support Paper Magazine, and we do believe that your work and your role in proposing such a pressure contribution to Paper Architectural Magazine is significant, and it's also very brave in this period, and also very experimental, I would say. So using your words now, Superposition is a periodical that investigates the human side of architecture. It's based in Europe, founded in 2020, and by a group of architects and artists who are nowadays Leo Bettini, Tibor Bielicki, Max Creasi, Elena Herl, and Dominic Kim. So superposition is a polyvalent concept, and super connotes the extraordinary in a positive sense, and position refers equally to a spatial and temporal and an intellectual emplacement. They believe in multilog, in the concept of the Wettbürger, and in the act of building bridges, intending to create a vibrant movement of friction. And they are motivated by a will to collaborate and by the desire to share observation and impressions. So thanks a million, guys, for joining. It's such a pleasure, and it's on you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. Thank you very much also to Steph for inviting us. It's really a pleasure following up what you're doing, and I can only say back that we're very fascinated on what you're doing here. I'll just close the window because they're starting construction site outside. 1 second.
Don't worry.
And I just want to continue with what Christian said, that he's interested in the new generation or the younger generation of seeing what they are doing. And it's interesting, especially that you invite so many different people to your panels, and that you also don't stop by generations and bringing together these generations. And I think that's one of the crucial interests also of superposition, that we always are interested in different positions by different generations. And that has also been part of our interest also when we worked on the previous magazine that we did, Planphase. That we always wanted to bring in well-established practices and uprising architects. And it's so nice that this idea is also lived by your format. And so I was extremely interested also to see what Christian had to say, since most of your participants are from the younger generation. And we also see now that the established generation has also been interested in shifting all the time. So thank you very much for that. I'll just share my screen. You see my screen?
We do.
Okay. Thank you. So in 2014, Frank Gehry was invited to a conference in Oviedo in Spain, where a reporter asked him, a journalist asked him if his buildings are just about spectacle. And he replied with his famous finger, and also replying in word that that's a quote. in this world we're living in, 98% of everything that is built and designed today is pure shit. There's no sense of design, no respect for humanity or anything else. They are damn buildings and that's it. Once in a while, however, a group of people do something special, very few, but God leave us alone. We are dedicated to our work. And we want to start with that quote because it's also something that we often face, is that we're getting asked silly questions, something like, why are you doing an architecture magazine, or why are you doing a magazine when there's so much good around? And we don't necessarily believe that there's not good around or that there's bad around, or, I mean, we're not going as far to say that 98% of what is there already in print media is pure shit, as extremist Frank Gehry would say that about buildings. But there's definitely a lack of, there's definitely something odd with other magazines, we believe, because we have the feeling that many magazines do not fulfill their what a magazine should be about, and in that sense they are fake, that they kind of just continue with what they have been doing for the last decades. And there's this difference between, for example, when you think about what the role of a magazine is or was 20 years ago, and what a role of architectural publications is, or periodicals, magazines is about today. And we see that there has been a shift. Social media and online blogs have been very well in transporting information. So the main idea of architectural magazines and periodicals is not to transport the most recent, most actual information, but to bring us together and to follow a certain point of view. So that's our idea, is not that fake idea that we want to be super actual and super recent, but that we want to bring something together. We feel authentic as a group in that we are comfortable in working with each other. As mentioned before, we have been working before for, I think, more than 10 years in different combinations, but the core of our group has always been working together. And it's this sort of authenticity that, in a way, we collaborate differently on superposition as we do when we worked on Planphase, for example. But there are also things that come together that continue throughout the years, and we also collaborate in different projects in different combinations. So we are, and I think this is a good moment to also mention the other two who are not here. It's Leo Bettini, who has been part of your series with Dominic before, and Max Creasy, our photographer, and who's also part of the editorial board, and a crucial member is also Wayne Daly of Daily Line from London, who are doing the art direction for the magazine. And our group works as sort of in a way of pursuing this idea of the multi-log, where we sit together and where we discuss. We have the dialogue, of course, we have the discourse. We're not always in favor of the same idea, or we are always arguing, and but it's a fruitful argue, and it's something that fuels also our horizon, because we have different backgrounds, and it's not that we think that we do have to have the same opinion on everything, but it's exactly this friction of having different opinions that always brings the most interesting results. Whereas whenever we work on the magazine or different projects, and so it's interesting that we also question ourselves, and that we let other people question us, and something that we will get back to later. One major fact is that we work with co-editors that not just for the danger of not repeating ourselves, but for letting other people question ourselves. But then again, we think that being authentic can also be very boring sometimes, and so I think there's no hiding fact that we also like to switch personalities in a way, and that we want to surprise each other.
Yeah, so an icon, from a personal point of view, I think is something which is really important to oneself. which doesn't lose relevance, and as a designer maybe something which motivates you to create something as similar or as good as. And in short, it's influential, or it's quite a dilemma. So when we did start the magazine, one thing that always got our juices flowing is Terrazzo magazine, which is certainly iconic in many ways. First of all, in the act of making, you had this kind of diverse group within kind of a certain movement at the time. And then as an object, it's truly an artifact. I mean, from the paper to the images and graphics, and then just the cover, which you see on the image is so good in a way. And then content-wise, it had all those amazing sections, and I mean, even the advertising were kind of so good and specific, and you could feel that there wasn't kind of any compromise, which is why it probably came to an end in a kind of after a rather short time, when kind of the energy went away. But still today it feels rather contemporary, and it's really relevant, at least to us. Yeah, so the ultimate goal is to create something iconic, which is not that easy, obviously, and it's also not determined by yourself also. And so if you can go to the next slide, we think one important element to achieve that is, of course, irony, or being ironic, because it gives you a certain freedom. Freedom because, first of all, we don't think that we ever could produce something similar, but also it gets easier when you have fun doing it. And we also have the idea that a copy can never be as good as the original somehow, and then therefore adding an ironic element helps to create a surprise sometimes. So you can even surprise yourself sometimes if you are relaxed in a way, and that helps also the idea to be kind of fresh rather than to be too serious. And so we try to be a little bit pop also. And so as a conclusion, most important to us when making the magazine is that we really want to do it, but also that we can do what we want to do. So we have kind of this freedom, and within this freedom, there's a lot of irony involved in everything we do. We can go to the next slide.
Yes, yeah, talking about irony, I think that's quite a good point. That was also quite important when finding the topic of the first issue. And when we were discussing that, we were not really sure what to do. And at some point we thought there couldn't be like the most boring thing that we could do, especially being based in Switzerland, was to talk about home or housing, since this year is like still kind of a royal discipline or something that really touches us. So that like home, we thought this could be something interesting, being also boring at the same time. And then after Freddy and Niels, which Tibor already mentioned, they were the co-editors for the first issue. They kind of came in the group and very soon introduced us to the political dominatrix. She's kind of an artist, Reba Maybury, and she's kind of a very extreme persona, and all her work kind of floats around this very extreme and hardcore ideas in a very different sense. So they kind of introduced the hardcore to the home. So we kind of they added this ambiguity that we are always searching for. And then kind of wrapping or finding the contributors. And so it was, we wanted to bring in like all our interests, and most of them of course are concerning architecture, but also we wanted to bring in our very specific interest in art, and that was Freddie Niels mainly, but also subcultural topics and so. And also we wanted to kind of have the magazine not like as a very specific architecture magazine, but more as with a like very specific position. But we wanted to have a magazine that is more of a cloud that collects different ideas of different positions, and also like very different people. So like coming from lowbrow to highbrow, kind of everything that that could be interesting to touch or to tackle different a topic from different sides. So in the first magazine, we have, as mentioned, a very interesting contribution by Reba Maybury, who is explaining kind of her experience in one of her submissive homes, which is in New York, where she awaits the submissive to come, and she already kind of looks around the apartment, finding strange fragments and elements. And then in the end, the whole story is about a mason jar, which is like this marmeladen glass that becomes like a very heavy symbol for toxic masculinity, like and also consumptionism, and like very political topics. And then also we have like coming from the small mason jar, we have the more iconic or big thing wrote by Adam Caruso, who is writing about the Bauhaus Kunstgewerbeschule in Bernau by Hannes Meyer, that he finds like a very interesting example of Bauhaus architecture, because it's not the Bauhaus stylistic architecture, like this rhetorical Bauhaus as we know it, but for him it's like more, it's the building represents more the like Bauhaus as a cultural movement. So to him it's more responsive and less rhetorical. And then he kind of compares it or puts to the other sides the this very iconic portrait by Andreas Gursky, who was commissioned by Apple to photograph the chief designer, and in this kind of surrounding designed by the Apple Park, designed by Norman Foster, that kind of is on the one hand kind of very iconic, but on the other hand fake, because the surrounding it's photographed in this Apple Park in the inside, and it's kind of not very clear if it's outside or inside. It's very strange. It's kind of fake, and then also the material being used, it's glass and it's metal. Everything is shiny. You don't really get the context, and all the materials being used, it's dissolving and kind of creating a strange atmosphere of no social transparency and so. So this topic also we found extremely interesting, but there were also some others by Markus Oehlen, for example, who showed his house. Markus Oehlen, he's an artist, and who proclaims his home as like more a screen for his artwork. Or other examples, Soft Baroque, they had a very interesting contribution. Or George Nattel, that portraits the homes of her artist friends and kind of shows the or yeah, wants to talk about where they come from and so. And then of course we had like 3 very nice contributions by Inge Wink and Jan de Wilder, who in the first article talked about a home that they built for also an artist, and then she kind of disappeared and so, and which was I think a very fun and interesting story in combination with that very nice piece of architecture that they produce. And for the next issue, like we also with after post-COVID era that we are now in, we want to kind of go from this interior or individual space environment. We want to go to the exterior environment, to the public space, and kind of again search for this ambiguity that we started with the hardcore home.
I think that wraps it up quite well when seeing Luca in the park.
Yeah, right.
Not that bad. Wow, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, I think was a nice triptych, let's say, and to have you together was there are some correspondences that I think would be